There's a guy who wants to talk to you.
What's he look like?
Serious?
As an atheist on YouTube, I think there's a bylaw that states that I have to take a turn at the folks over at the Way of the Master. Now, I'm not going to waste time going after the whole banana and soda can scenarios because that's been done many times already. No, what I want to discuss is the flawed nature of the arguments posited in some of the material they have available online. Head guy Ray Comfort has been known to say that he could disprove evolution in 3 minutes without the use of faith or the Bible, but I haven't found any place online where that claim is backed up. I look forward to finding it. Now, the Way of the Master people do have a book called God Does Not Believe in Atheists that contains a section called the Atheist Test, which they've spelled out in online videos. In the Atheist Test, Ray Comfort states that he doesn't believe in atheists because such a person cannot be. Then they begin their proof.
When I meet an atheist, I like to give him the Atheist Test. I say, can I give you the Atheist Test? He says, yeah, go ahead. I said, it begins with 2 questions. Kind of strange questions, but they're most necessary. The first question is, could you please tell me how many pieces of sand are on the combined islands of Hawaii? He goes, what? I said, do you know? He says, no, I don't. Second question, can you please tell me how many hairs are on the back of a fully grown male Tibetan yak? He says, what? I said, do you know? He says, no, I don't. Now these are necessary, these questions, because there are some people who think they know everything.
Now guys, I can see where you're going with this, and you're going to go there because you're beginning with a false assumption. Since your assumption is false, you will fall down a seemingly logical pathway and end up at a false conclusion. But continue.
If I say to you, there is no God, that's called an absolute statement. In order for me to make an absolute statement and be right, I have to have absolute knowledge. I have to know everything about that subject. Let me give you an example of another absolute statement. If I say to you, there is no gold in China, in order for that to be true, I have to know everything about China. I have to know what's under every rock. I have to know what's inside of every rock, inside every jewelry store, and what's inside every Chinese person's mouth to see if there's any gold in there, in a filling, in a stone, in a ring. I have to have all knowledge of China to make that absolute statement that there's no gold. However, if I want to make the statement, there is gold in China, I don't have to have all knowledge of China, I just have to have a little knowledge. I just need to see one person's gold filling. I have to see one piece of gold, and I can say with confidence there is gold in China. So for a person to say there is no God, to make that absolute statement, they have to have all knowledge or be omniscient, and nobody is.
Let's say this circle represents all the knowledge in the universe. Let's say, Mr. Professing Atheist, you know an incredible 1% of all the knowledge in the universe. Is it possible in the 99% of the knowledge you haven't yet come across, there is ample evidence to prove that God exists? And if you're reasonable, you'll have to say, well, it is possible in the knowledge I haven't yet come across, there is ample evidence to prove that God does exist.
The false assumption you began with was the definition of atheist. Your definition of atheist is one who knows there is no God, or one who says he knows there is no God. Now, neither of these is an acceptable definition, and you know it, but to use the proper definition would deprive you of your position and your conclusion. The position you require is one of control. You have a set goal, the non-existence of atheist. To reach your goal, you first must control the terms of the battle. In this case, you literally attempt to control the terms. You've set up a definition of atheist that doesn't reflect reality in any way, so that you may then show that no one fits that definition. A classic straw man argument. So what is the definition of an atheist and why aren't you using it? I believe there are 2 reasons you're not using the proper definition. An atheist is generally defined in 3 ways. A person that does not believe in the existence of God or gods. Now, this first definition is more passive. A person isn't convinced, or the person isn't aware of the concept of a God. My son, for example, has no idea of the concept of a God, and thus would be an atheist, unless you consider his worship of his father. The second definition is more active. A person that believes a God or gods do not exist. The important word you avoid in your definition, guys, is believes. And why is that? That's because personal belief is something you can't disprove. You don't have access to people's thoughts. You don't have the ability to prove whether or not someone is an atheist because you don't have the ability to prove whether or not they believe something. So you intentionally ignore the true definition, and you're perfectly aware of this because at the beginning of your video, you state,
If you get a dictionary and look up the word atheism, you'll find it says it's the belief that there's no God.
But your victory required an atheist to have access to all knowledge, and the word belief made that impossible. Belief, as you know, does not require all knowledge, so you conveniently ignored the definition you had already given for an atheist, and came up with a new standard in order to achieve your alleged victory. The third definition of an atheist is possibly the most difficult for you. A person that rejects theism. That is, they've seen the evidence in support of theistic beliefs and have rejected it. Now, this definition is more difficult for you because it's a reflection, it's a reaction to your own belief system. In an attempt to attack an atheist for his disbelief, you would have to better defend your own so-called evidence. So you move to your conclusion.
And if you're reasonable, you'll have to say, well, it is possible in the knowledge I haven't yet come across, there is ample evidence to prove that God does exist. So he's forced to say, well, with the limited knowledge that I have at present, I've come to the conclusion there's no God, but I really don't know.
That's right. He's not technically an atheist, he's an agnostic. He's a person who doesn't know if there's a God.
What you believe to be your trump card here is at best a loose and at worst a false definition of terms. You say an atheist must admit that he only believes there is no God, as if you're getting them to confess something they're unwilling to admit, when in truth that's what they've been saying all along. You say, without absolute knowledge, he can't claim to know, only believe, somehow making him an agnostic. But by that loose definition you've laid out in that conclusion, theists don't exist either. Theists are agnostic. Everyone is agnostic, by your standard. Now, you might argue, no, I don't say I don't know God exists. I say I know God exists. But according to the points you laid out in your piece, that's an absolute statement. And you don't know God exists. You believe God exists. You have faith God exists. You don't have access to all knowledge in the universe, so you can't make that absolute statement. Now, you may think you've come across that evidence that proves the facts for you.
I have to see one piece of gold, and I can say with confidence there is gold in China.
But the only proof you have is that of your memory and your natural senses, which can't always be trusted. And so all you have is your faith to tell you those are accurate. Besides, since you don't have all the knowledge of every single bit of the universe, don't you have to acknowledge that you could one day come across proof that what you believe to be evidence is not evidence at all? So to be truthful, don't you have to say,
well, with the limited knowledge that I have at present, I've come to the conclusion there's God, but I really don't know.
That's right.
So according to your standards, you are not a theist. You should be defined as an agnostic, which I find hilarious.
That's my job. That's what I do. I don't lose. I win. Is there no one on this planet to even challenge me?
Maybe you came by to congratulate me on last night's victory.